By Congressman Ed Royce, chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee. What do you want to hear tomorrow night from the president, Mr. Chairman?
Well, Andrea, I think what we'd like to hear is a strategy to defeat ISIS, one which would use air power, because there's not support among members of Congress on either side of the aisle for combat troops on the ground, but there is support for air power, and there's support for bringing our NATO allies in to carry out those airstrikes with us, as well as support for bringing the Gulf in. And lastly, there's a lot of support for the idea of arming the Free Syrian Army and the Kurdish forces in order to provide them the wherewithal as infantry on the ground to roll back ISIS and to defeat ISIS. So that's the kind of plan and strategy we hope to hear laid out.
Now, is there a feeling among some, though, that it's too late to usefully arm the Free Syrian Army, that ISIS has now become so active, and al-Nusra, the other very radical rebel group, and that there isn't a space any longer for the moderate rebels?
You know, I met with the leadership of the Free Syrian Army, some of their leadership last night, and they're still very much in the fight, holding Aleppo. They need that support. They frankly have been trying for several years to get that support. And you also have the requests. Last week we had the request from the foreign minister of Kurdistan saying the Peshmerga forces also needed the anti-tank weapons, the artillery on the ground. So I think we want to see a strategy that gives them what they need in terms of weaponry to match ISIS. And I think it's unfortunate that ISIS wasn't stopped earlier as it began its trek across the desert. That's when the airstrikes 7 months ago, frankly, should have hit those columns. That was the request from our embassy in the region at the time. And I think it would have retarded their ability then, or pushed back their ability to take so many cities if we had done it then. We've got to do it now, because otherwise they're using the sanctuary to plan new attacks. And because they're targeting Europe and the United States, it's necessary for us to go forward with the airstrikes to take them out.
And public opinion has really shifted in terms of, from the NBC News Wall Street Journal poll, and the rest of the poll will reveal at 6:30 tonight, it's really gone up in terms of the people want the U.S. to become more active in world affairs. Still a plurality, less active, but there's been a big shift of 7 points.
Because when you have a situation where something like this, where we don't put together a coalition and don't engage early on and make certain, for example, that the Kurds had what they needed, it is unfortunate that their men and women on the ground in the Kurdish Peshmerga forces did not have the weaponry. You know, they were defeated unnecessarily in some of these battles. So we've got to pay attention. But our goal should be to empower allies in the region so that we don't have to get in. But at this point, it's gone so long that it's necessary for the air power to be used in order to defeat ISIS, yes.
Now, final point, there's support for air power to be used in Iraq, and that's what the president's talking about now. What about in Syria?
Well, I think there is that support in Congress, but I think it's going to depend upon the president laying out his strategy, explaining that NATO allies are going to join us in this campaign, along with Australia with their Air Force, and explaining also that the Arab League, you know, we're engaging now to try to bring them on board, and the Gulf states are going to be supportive of this effort. So it needs to be not just the United States. You know, this is their region. They need to be doing the work on the ground, but we can be supportive. And I think for that, if that strategy is laid out well, I think we'll coalesce the support, not just from Congress, but probably from the American public, and certainly from the international community, in order to deal here with an ISIS threat that isn't just directed at the United States, of course. It's you know, Australia, it's the capitals in Europe, it's Central Asia. Most of the foreign fighters have come through the caliphate, through the virtual caliphate, to that region. Many of them have passports to go home. And so I think we can put together an international coalition here to help deal with the problem and to defeat that organization.
Support, but not necessarily a vote.
Well, I think there has to be a vote on the funding The president, of course, will argue that he has the authority because he has the previous authority to go after al-Qaeda and al-Qaeda affiliates. This is an al-Qaeda affiliate. I think, though, that there is going to have to be a vote on the appropriation, right?
The money.
To give the money to the Free Syrian Army, to the Kurdish forces, to pay for the operation. That's the vote I would expect, yes.
Ed Royce, thanks so much from the Hill. And